policy by Westerners and the use of the OSCE as a platform to reach their vested interests, the vested interests of Westerners and NATO. And this platform failed to work for the benefits of all the participating actors. And since the beginning of the special military operation, it is used as an instrument against Russia. As we said, the minister is expected to have a press conference following this meeting. On the 9th of February, Sergei Lavrov will participate in the 15th Middle East Conference of the Far East Conference of the International Discussion Club Valdai. The event will take place amidst the swiftly evolving situation in the Middle East and the Northeast. They will focus on settlement matters, including the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, conflicts in Syria, Sudan, Yemen, and other crises. The topic that was announced is a continued and novelty in the Middle East amid a collapsed world order. Another package of events attended by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The minister is going to give an address during the plenary session of the State Duma on the 11th of February about priorities of Russia's international policy, and will take Q&A session. And before that, on the 10th of February, which is a special date for us, it is the day of the diplomatic worker, he's going to meet with Vyacheslav Volodin, heads of parties and committees. The annual meeting between the minister and the MPs is designed to enhance the cooperation between legislative and executive branches of power, to foster our position on the international arena and to fight against those who are against Russia's policy, and to outline the Russian international policy for the future. Speaking about our professional day, I'm going to set it aside. Some activities are planned within the ministry as well. Let us move forward to the current agenda, the situation in Ukraine. Over the past week, drone strike, 75 persons were affected. 12 died, including one infant. 63 were injured, including 4 children. A few facts. Belgorodskaya Oblast, 29th of January. Ukrainian drones struck the Central Regional Hospital and affected 3 civilians. A man and 17-year-old girl were wounded on the 1st of January. Belgorod once again was shelled. 1 person is injured. A few vehicles were affected. 1 person died and 5 were wounded. In the night of the 2nd of February, in a private home, 2 civilians died. 1 drone attacked a service vehicle supplying bread. In the afternoon, a drone attacked this settlement where resided the head of the Dunaysky settlement, leaving him injured. Compared to the similar period in 2025, the number of casualties grew manifolds. Bryanskaya Oblast, the 30th of January, FPV drones in the village of Novy Ropsk wounded a woman. On the 2nd of February, a UAV attacked the village of Polovy Novosolky and civilian vehicles in the village of Rudna, Tsata. 3 people affected. In the morning of the 3rd of February, a drone kamikaze wounded a driver of the agro-industrial holding Miratorg. On the 1st of February, A woman died as a result of a drone attack. Her infant son also died. He was born in 2020. Another boy born in 2018 was injured. Zaporozhye Oblast, between the 31st of January and the 2nd of February, FPV attacks in the towns of Vasilievka and the village of Mikhailovka left injured 5 people. 1 of them died. In Kursk, the drones affected 3 people in the oblast of Kherson between the 31st of January and the 3rd of February. Drone attacks struck homes. 10 people were injured. Russian law enforcement agencies keep bringing to criminal justice Ukrainian war crimes, their accomplices, and foreign mercenary. A participant of the terrorist battalion Aida, Russian citizen Yulia Tolopa, was sentenced to 9 years of imprisonment between 2014 and 2015. She participated on the side of Ukraine in hostilities on the territories of Donetsk and Lugansk republics as a commander of the vehicle BMP-2. She's in the international wanted list. The criminal regime in Kiev keeps blatantly being supported and shielded by its sponsors. Now we know exactly from recordings, video and photo materials of how these so-called Western elite and Epstein materials, which were published during these days, give us a proof of how the Western elite treats children, including their own children. Basically, they do not care any longer on what their fate will be. You see how they treat them. Imagine those who for decades subjected kids to violence, and they did it en masse, involving more victims, underage children and adults, using as an instigation tool their career promotion. That is who gives the Kiev regime immense funds to kill civilians, to kill children, to legalize in Ukraine, as Zelensky did in 2014, the so-called black transplantology. Body organs are being taken from people without their consent. On the 3rd of February, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte re-emerged in Kiev. He stated that after the peace agreement in Ukraine, once it is adopted, some troops, weaponry, aviation and maritime forces will appear from so-called the coalition of the willing. After what we now know about the Western elite from Epstein files, it has a new image now. So these troops will be headed by Great Britain and France. Of course, these are unhidden plans of the foreign military intervention. For us, this is unacceptable. On multiple occasions, Russia said that the deployment of any troops, any Western troops in Ukraine under any flag will be considered as a threat to our national security, and these troops will be considered as a legitimate military target. Let me remind you that this extension of the alliance has become one of the underlying causes of the conflict, and the settlement requires its elimination. Russia will do that using various ways, including military and political methods. And speaking about the democratic present in Ukraine after believing Western promises about their good future. There are still corruption scandals ongoing in Ukraine, especially after the situation with the funds that were embezzled. They were allocated to be used for light, heat and water provision, but it went other ways. That was a so-called counter-corruption center measure which concluded 7 agreements with the municipal enterprise Kiev Teplo Energo. It turned out that a company called New Perspective Lux was headed by a female cook residing in Slovakia and who has no experience in energy provision. On top of that, the news told us that a generator which was previously donated by Poland to Ukraine emerged on a large Ukrainian marketplace, OLX. It shows a true attitude of Bankova to people. The main idea is to fill up their pockets, and they don't care about the expectations of ordinary citizens. Instead, the regime of Zelensky, with the support of Westerners, kills people, taking them to prisons, making energy experiments regarding their own citizens. If someone dares saying that it is not the Kiev regime which is responsible for that, I will say no, it is the Kiev regime and its sponsors who are responsible for undermining energy lines in Kiev. They wanted not only to have an explosion, but to undermine electricity lines in general, which would put on hold electricity generation for the Crimean Peninsula. It is the regime that was responsible for a many-year water blockade. This is the Kiev regime which keeps using drones to drop explosives, which keeps exploding gas stations. On top of that, energy infrastructure is becoming its main target. And now, ideologists, supported by the Western orchestrators, started to destroy the energy security of their own country, Ukraine. The Kiev regime has already eaten all the funds. It has used the funds given from the West. On the 23rd of January, Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko in her Telegram channel stated that they are going to simplify the use of confiscated assets from Russian citizens. She claimed that 26 corporate rights will be put on sales through the open tenders, and the revenue will be used through the fund of elimination of the consequences of the military aggression to restore the infrastructure economy and to support people. You see how it looks when we now know where these funds go. So the regime used to allocate these resources to restore its economy, but now it is simply going to take these funds. Recently, the scale of the corruption in Ukraine wasn't hidden, something that penetrates all the branches of power from top to the bottom. Apparently, today, the assets confiscated from our citizens, if they are sold, will not go to restore the economy. They will stay in the pockets of Zelensky and his lapdogs. Please give me at least one example when the funds that Bankova received were not embezzled. For us, this is a case in point of embezzlement, and we hope that the law enforcement bodies will give the appropriate assessment to such activities. But let me stress once again, these are just a few examples of how money allocated to Ukraine are being looted by the Kiev regime. Just a few examples. The Kiev regime found another way to satisfy its money appetites. European expert circles show that there is a growing sales of cultural and historical values in Ukraine. This refers to the so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine. It comes to collectors and, of course, there is officials. Under the pretext of temporary transition, these objects are used to decorate rooms that belong to those collectors. This so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine uses its status to say that these objects belong to the church, and of course it makes it simpler to go through customs control and to sell these values abroad. Under a concocted pretext, these objects are transported to Poland and from that to Belgium, Italy, Spain, and Germany. For instance, Germany receives those valuables as commercial goods. Postal services are engaged, thus reducing customs and customs burden and the burden coming from other controlling bodies. So as for those auctionaries, they are located in Great Britain, France, Sweden, Denmark, and Netherlands, and they end up in private collections. Amidst all this, let us not forget about the historical memory, which is being destroyed, something that is not on sale. On the 30th of January, with the photos of the director of the Ukrainian History Museum, Yuri Sachuk, takes off the letters from the monument Heroes of the Front. Their names are immortal and the feats will live forever. This hideous action was described by the objectives of restoration, further conservation, and museum rethinking, quote unquote, in the context of a continuous work so that the memorial space would speak the language of the modern Ukraine.
So the modern Ukraine that has legalized everything, all those dog head, all those swastikas, so that's the modern language. But do you know many restorators who would come with rusty hammers and take off parts of monuments in order to conduct restoration work? No, I am not aware of anything like that. Actually, the purpose, it was not concealed to erase the memory of those who fought against the Nazis during the Great Patriotic War. So it's around 7 million who fought, and around 1.5 million who sacrificed their lives. It's the so-called decolonization of Ukraine, and there was an address to the National Memory Institute and the Ministry of Culture in order to rename the library in Kharkiv. It is named after Vladimir Korolenko, who criminally wrote his works in Russian, allegedly. Is that normal, you think? Actually, Sharikov, he did not even dream of that. It's some beastly level of dehumanization, of barbaric action. It's even degradation. Also in Kharkiv, neo-Nazis destroyed a memorial plaque to fallen Soviet soldiers installed by employees of the Kharkiv Institute of Physics and Technology. Modern-day Ukrainian Nazis literally spit in the souls of millions of people, but they will not succeed in trampling on true history and the gratitude of their descendants. We will preserve it in our school books, in our documentaries, in our libraries. We will convey to future generation, future Ukrainian generation, their history. And we will do our best for the memory of our ancestors, never to be erased. Modern Ukrainian Nazis, as I have already mentioned, they have led to some unlimited level of cynicism. It's even not about cynicism no longer, because cynicism, it implies some dichotomic game between reasonable things and hypocrisy. Here there are no longer a game, no bipolar things, but no one chooses anything. It's just instincts of destruction. It's just about that are full scale. Just have a look what is happening in the language area. The Commissioner for the Protection of the State Language, Madam Ivanovska, she can be called the Sprachenführer. Literally, she just overacted herself. On one of the channels online, she expressed outrage that Ukrainians immediately switched to the Russian language when the law does not require them to speak Ukrainian. A quotation from Madam Ivanovska: even if you are at work, you decide you not some business issue, but discuss your dog or cat, you still have to do it in the state language, the Ukrainian language. Because you are at work, you are in a public space. Yelena Ivanovska stated, such a person would be just highly in demand in the Third Reich. Just check who is discussing dogs and cats in which language. It's just powerful. There are so many problems in Ukraine: rampant corruption, violations of human rights, lack of electricity and disruption with electricity, catastrophe with water supplies. But Kiev regime representatives, they do not worry about that. It's not an important issue for them. They're just concerned about who is speaking Russian and where. People speak, they communicate. But for those eradicating the Russian language in Ukraine, they even think in Russian. So they have not reached how to govern the thoughts of Ukrainians, for them to stop thinking in the Russian language. That's their dream. But they will use chips. With the use of artificial intelligence, they will succeed, I hope. But those who have chosen the Ukrainian language, and Ivanovska thinks that she is Homo sapiens on this basis, such situation is unacceptable. she thinks, because those who are subject to Russian propaganda, they just turned into some chained dogs and they start to attack those who speak Russian. For example, a case in Lviv. In a cafe, a mother and a child were speaking Russian. It sparked an outburst of hatred from one of the visitors who started to cry and to shout and to try to make the Russian-speaking family leave the establishment. Fortunately, other guests did not support this outburst and stood up for the mother and the child. So in Ukraine, such zombies are ready to do anything for the language of Pushkin, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, make it disappear forever. It's a true genocide. But despite all the artificial limits, the Russian language, it continues to exist. Just believe it will continue to do so. And all the facts that we have mentioned and the facts that we will mention today, they testify that the tasks of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine will be achieved, and the Russian leadership has repeatedly mentioned that. Now regarding the Nuremberg process, it was the trial of humankind, the trial of Nazism. But now there was a systematic investigation and prosecution of Nazi criminals and their accomplices. So such trials are called the Soviet Nuremberg in the USSR. The work was conducted in the conditions of the ongoing fighting. The Extraordinary State Commission for the Establishment and Investigation of the Crimes of the Nazi Invaders and their Accomplices was established in 1942. Atrocities were documented, and those responsible were held accountable, and revenge would not just remain a slogan. Some of the guilty were tried quickly and privately right in the camps, and the most high-profile cases were brought to open trials in the cities that endured the terror of occupation. Krasnodar and Kharkiv became the first symbols of this kind of justice, and a new trial followed. So those whose crimes were confirmed by numerous testimonies and expert examination found themselves before such a trial. Thus, trials took place in Krasnodar, Smolensk, Bryansk, Minsk, Kiev, Veliky Luki, Nikolaev, Riga, Leningrad, Stalinodonetsk, Bobruisk, Sevastopol, Poltava, Vitebsk, Novgorod, Komer, Chernigov, Chisinau, and Khabarovsk. 80 years ago, from the 17th to the 28th of January 1946, now, literally now, it's the 80th anniversary from this moment. In Kiev, there was an open trial, following which the Kiev Military District Tribunal sentenced 15 high-ranking Nazi criminals for monstrous atrocities against civilians. The Nazi-occupied territory of Soviet Ukraine became the scene of systematic terror and genocide, mass executions of civilians, the targeted extermination of Jews and other groups, often on the outskirts of cities in ravines, anti-tank ditches, quarries, including Babi Yar, the burning and destruction of settlements, torture, beatings, executions using gas vans, gas trucks, and other methods of murder, forced labor of Ostarbeiters, crimes against prisoners of war, executions, starvation, labor, and mass deaths in camps. 12 people were sentenced to death by hanging, and 3 to long terms of hard labor for the mass murder of civilians and prisoners of war, and the destruction of cities and villages in the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. The main defendant was SS Gruppenführer Paul Scheer. He oversaw punitive operations directly and personally ordered the execution of any local residents in the occupied cities after dark. His guilt in crimes against humanity has been fully proven. SS Obersturmbannführer Georg Heinrich also admitted his guilt. In October 1942, he ordered the execution of 3,000 children in the city of Melitopol. But do you know the reason of that? 3,000 children. Maybe you would think some committed diversion, and the guilt of those 3,000 children. They were born after mixed marriages. They were collected by the police and gendarmerie and taken to the outskirts of the city and then shot. Maybe someone in Kiev remembered how honest and heroic their ancestors were back then. And it's just offensive for their memory, an offense caused by the Bankova officials. But I think our mission is to remind about that. Painful historical lessons have been forgotten in modern Ukraine. The Zelensky regime and his militants have long surpassed their ideological idols from the Third Reich in cruelty and hatred. They are exterminating civilians in the same territories, the same land that was under the yoke of Nazi occupiers obsessed with the brown plague. And their descendants now live within the former Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. Their monuments are destroyed. And their feet is depicted on the monument and erased now and desecrated now by this rusty hammer. For us, the decisions and conclusions of the Kiev-Nuremberg remain relevant. Any crimes against humanity must be assessed legally and morally. Therefore, like our ancestors 80 years old, we are working comprehensively to bring to justice Ukrainian neo-Nazis and foreign mercenaries guilty of atrocities against the civilian population. The efforts of the investigative committee and our national courts handling such cases and making decisions of that, the work by Rodon Miroshnik and Maxim Grigoriev, they just operate in their own areas and promote our ideas in the information space, the media space. And the main, very important role is played by the international community. They do not allow to forget about the bloody crimes of the Banderites. I would like to draw attention to articles by Russian and Belarusian historians Eduard Popov, Ukrainian Nationalism Today, Sources of Origin and Ideological and Political Typology, and Kirill Shevchenko, From Galicia, Rus to Western Ukraine. And also a book by Yegor Yakovlev, Nazi Genocide of the Peoples of the USSR, Unknown Pages, edited under the auspices of the Russian Historical Society. And I would like to add by myself, do find the links to the relevant material, the text version of the Today briefing, and please find the coverage of the cinema chronicle of the Nuremberg Tribunal, the tribunal over the Nazis. This testimony exists. This documentary coverage, for example, by Dina Pronicheva, who survived in the Babi Yar tragedy and found the force to become to testify about the crimes of the Nazis on the territory of Ukraine. If you have not seen this coverage, your life will no longer be the same. It will be a shadow of horror of the tragedy. and on the other hand, of the courage and persistence of those who lived through that hell and found the forces to condemn those criminals, and then who have lived a dignified life. And it will be a shudder what is done with their memory today in Ukraine. Those who are ready to sell everything, mother and father, grandfather, brothers and sisters, everyone. The main thing is unclear for what. Maybe not for money, but for the loyalty of this process of dehumanization. Now have a look. It's a different topic. It's not about history, it's about modern days, but it's connected with what is happening today in Ukraine. The Nord Stream. The Western countries, they do not abandon attempts to avoid responsibility for the bombing of the Nord Stream gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea. In January this year, Germany, Denmark and Sweden circulated a letter at the UN Security Council on the progress of the investigation and the sabotage. The document notes that in December 2025, Ukrainian citizen Sergei Kuznetsov, suspected of committing the terrorist attack, was extradited to Germany from Italy. So it's a long-known fact. The arrest of a Ukrainian intelligence officer Sergei Kuznetsov on suspicion of involvement in the gas pipeline bombings. Once again, this letter claims direct quotation, impartiality and independence of the German investigation. The idea of this entire letter is the principles of the rule of law and Berlin's commitment to upholding its national obligations. So the idea is subtly fed to the international community that this labor-intensive terrorist attack was the work of such self-taught divers. You don't need to be an expert to realize the absurdity of such a letter and all its talking points, because such act of sabotage, amateurs are not capable of that. So that's what Western intelligence agencies are trying to invent. There is also a version of American journalist Seymour Hersh, according to which the mining and bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline was carried out by Western intelligence agencies under the cover of NATO naval exercises. So maybe this investigation by Berlin maybe has affected the NATO headquarters. Maybe someone just questioned Biden and Nuland, who promised to commit something like that before, had done that before. And Biden also had said that he had the instruments necessary for the destruction of the Nord Stream. It's a failure to adhere to its international obligations by Germany. And Denmark, Germany and Sweden, they have an obligation to investigate this terrorist attack in good faith. It has made a lot of harm to the economy and the ecology of the region. However, Berlin, Copenhagen and Stockholm consistently avoided any cooperation with Russia in establishing the truth. Moreover, the latter two countries at one point completely abandoned their national investigations. Allegedly, nothing could be found. The lack of visible results, they did not hesitate to stop their investigations despite that. And whatever role is given by organizers, like mining and some maneuvers in order to distract, and the informing of stakeholders during the process itself and on the outcomes, the authors of that letter, they just forgot to mention about other Ukrainian suspects, also about Zhuravlov, who was also placed on the international wanted list. According to the available information, he is currently in Poland, but Warsaw categorically refuses to extradite him to German justice, violating international obligations. Not to mention Ukraine, that is literally a safe haven for those divers. We will just continue to seek the truth about Nord Stream explosions, including measures by Russia at the UN Security Council. No destructive steps by Westerners will shake our resolve to ensure justice, and sooner or later those responsible for this act of sabotage will be brought to justice.
The situation in Moldova. Once again, they follow the principle: if something goes wrong, it is Russia to be blamed. At our previous briefing, we gave comments to the crisis situation in the energy sector of Moldova caused by the combative actions by the official Chisinau. On the 28th of January, the head of Moldovan Minister of Energy stated that the significant growth of tariffs on energy in the Republic was owing not to the internal decisions, but, once again, quote-unquote, Russia used energy as a political weapon, end of quote. Moldovan authorities seem to have forgotten that in December 2022, they solemnly announced their rejection of the Russian gas. Once again, another quotation: now Russia will not have any tools to blackmail us. And once again, in Chisinau, we hear about some kind of energy weapon of Moscow. Well, it seems to me that you have reached all your objectives, let's say approximately 4 years ago, or isn't it so? Please try to be clear about whether this weapon exists or not. We gave all the comments from our side to those statements. As long as we're talking about energy, let me remind you that all the industries in Moldova were established under the Soviets, the time that they hate so much, that they like demonizing. I'm talking about authorities, not about citizens. After the Great Patriotic War, the energy system of Moldova was built from scratch in record times. In 1948, compared to 1940, electricity generation grew by 39-fold. Less than 3 years passed after the end of the Second World War. Imagine starvation, damage, destruction, so many wounded, so many challenges. But at that time, the Soviet authorities had electricity generated in Moldova 39 times more than in the pre-war period. The commission of a powerful Moldovan water power plant and the first and the second power plants and many other electricity generation plants allowed for a 25-fold growth of electricity generated. Moldova not only had electricity for industrial and household needs in the country, but it also supplied energy to neighboring states, including Ukraine and Bulgaria. In terms of electricity produced per capita, Moldova left many developed countries behind. Another case in point: educational system. The USSR left to Moldova as a legacy its educational system, the system of primary, secondary and higher education built from scratch. According to the open sources, during the last 5 years, Moldovan authorities, under the pretext of optimizing them, closed over 200 schools and gymnasiums. As a result, the youth see no prospects to get a decent education at home and fleeing the country en masse. It is not that we are desirous to speak about Moldova, but we have to respond to their statements. So let us continue. The accumulated inflation rate between 2021 and 2024 reached an unprecedented level of 66%. In 2025, approximately 80% of new loans were allocated to cover the national debts of the country, and the so-called euro integration de facto led to a collapse of the system of state enterprises. According to the register of public property, by the beginning of 2025, only 45% of public enterprises were active, and 25 of them were non-solvent. That is the reality of the former prosperous Moldova. Why? This is the outcome, the result of the Russophobic sentiment imposed by the West. That is the ticking bomb. Another topic, partial repeated election are planned for the 9th of February. This is a blatant mockery at the electoral rights of the citizens. Before that, there was a legitimate interference into the judicial and legal branches of power systems of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In November 2025, a close ally, Sinja Karan, won elections. It was not okay for Western Israel of crude manipulations and pressure in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The validation of the expressed will of citizens was undermined under concocted pretext. For instance, that it will sow discord among Serbians. Apparently, the West uses artificial provocations of internal political tensions in order to save its dying colonial power, which is underpinned by the principle divide and rule. We express solidarity with the patriotic authorities of the Republic Srpska, who are opposing firmly and with dignity this external dictation and fight for the rights of Serbians in Bosnia and Herzegovina in light with the principles of the Dayton peace agreements. I also was asked to give a comment to the statement given by the French foreign minister about the efforts to reduce Russia's revenue from the exportation of energy and countering its illegitimate oil supplies. France persists in its attempts to restrict the possibilities of a bilateral trade. That is how we assess this statement by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, Jean-Noël Barrot. As he said,
совместной пресс-конференции с министром иностранных дел Турции 27 января текущего года. Мы исходим из того, что многоплановое российско-турецкое взаимодействие в торгово-экономической сфере является взаимовыгодным, вносит существенный вклад, в том числе в обеспечение энергетической безопасности Турции и европейских потребителей российских энергоресурсов. Мы рассчитываем, что турецкие партнеры, осознавая преимущества проверенных временем партнерских отношений с нашей страной, четко и недвусмысленно выскажутся против
ministries of 61 states. In 2025, the International Association of Young Diplomats was presented at the UN during the ECOSOC Youth Forum and a high-level meeting of the 80th session of the UN General Assembly. The business program of the conference includes a presentation of leading educational projects by MGIMO, and the Secretariat of the session will hold its session. The rector of the university, Mr. Tokunov, expected to attend, as well as representatives of ministry, young diplomats, and employees of international organizations and federal executive bodies. Another interesting fact is that the UNESCO Mendeleev competition was announced. The prize was established in 2015 and is fully funded by Russia. It is one of the most interesting prizes, joint competition worth $500,000. The prize is awarded to those who promote basic or fundamental sciences. In 2023, Irina Iretska from Russia and Professor Klaus Mühlen from Germany won this prize in 2023. We expect the announcement of the winners of the third competition. The awarding ceremony will be held this year in Paris. The submissions for the fourth competition will last up until the 15th of March. So slightly over a month is left to submit your candidacy. Of course, we are willing to see bigger geography among candidates. Once again, you will find the links to this competition and to additional information about it in the text of the briefing. We are committed to promoting this through our ministry. As I promised, a few words about the Day of a Diplomatic Employee. Some of the words I'm going to say are traditional, but I'm going to say some exciting news as well. On the 10th of February, we are going to celebrate traditionally our professional day, the Day of a Diplomatic Employee. It was established by the presidential decree of the Russian Federation on the 31st October 2002. The date was selected for a good reason, because that's the date when the first Posolsky Prikaz was documented. Apparently, our foreign policy counts many more years. We started counting from the early years, but that is the date that we selected for the professional day. The history of the Russian diplomacy counts more than 1 century. The construction of the Russian Foreign Policy Ministry repeats the status of the strengthening of the Russian statehood. Epoch changed, but cultural, spiritual values remained unwavering. In our profession, this is our commitment to sincere, active passion to our state, profound understanding of its national interest, robust commitment to the ideals of truth, cooperation, mutual support. These are the values that have been reflected in the UN Charter, all in all. According to the tradition, the ministry will hold a series of solemn activities, for instance, laying wreaths to memorial plates with the name of diplomats who perished while fulfilling their duties or on the fronts of the Great Patriotic War, as well as laying wreaths to the monument of Mr. Primakov and tombs of leading Russian diplomats. The ministry is going to inaugurate a few historical and documentary exhibitions. One of them is dedicated to the work of leading expert of the foreign ministry. These exhibitions will be inaugurated here, but they are going to be open to public because we're going to post it online as well. I'm not going to go into detail about these exhibitions because you will see them with your own eyes. In the 10th of February, in the evening, or rather in the afternoon, there will be a solemn meeting of employees of the ministry where Sergei Lavrov will make a statement and certificates will be awarded. Many people celebrate this day abroad from their homeland. Various festive activities are planned to take place in our foreign missions. Of course, we're going to brief you on them. And let me stress out, yes, it is our professional day, but we tend to celebrate it not at home with closed doors, but this is part of our diplomatic work. Stay tuned. You're going to find lots of materials dedicated to the history of Russian diplomacy, to its objectives and the way to reach them. All the materials will be posted online. You will find them on our website in the special chapter dedicated to the Day of the Diplomatic Employee. You will also find interviews and publications made by our ambassadors and so on and so forth. I'm going to also announce you that Minister Lavrov has given an interview, and the texts of those interviews will be posted on a wide range of topics. Once again, stay tuned and be updated.
But I have promised some additional information in addition to our professional holiday, and I have promised to do that back last year, and we have done that. In anticipation of Diplomats' Day, together with the Historical and Documentary Department, we have prepared a detailed material on key stages in the development of Russian diplomacy from the start of Russian statehood and to the present day. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation continues its work to preserve the memory and legacy of the leaders of the Foreign Service. The material covers the key milestone and principle upon which the Russian foreign policy has been built and continues to be built. It's not just a history of negotiations. It reflects a millennia-long journey of Russia as an independent and distinct civilization. And our diplomatic service, continuing its tradition to tirelessly explain Russia's position on the international stage and contributes to the formation of an objective picture of the world. The publication of such materials is particularly important today when the countries of the collective West are trying by hook or by crook to downplay the contribution of Russian diplomats to the geopolitical transformation of the world. Some fake verdicts and statements are published. Key facts are distorted. It's all for the sake of short-term gain. But we know our history, and we will remind of that to those who surround us. We will continue to fight for the truth. A detailed material on the history of Russian diplomacy will be posted on the Ministry website in the Historical Background tab of the Diplomats' Day section. In addition, we will publish brief biographical profiles of the heads of the Foreign Ministry from the times of Peter the Great to the present day. We invite everyone to study the history of Russian diplomacy. And according to the tradition, a link to this section will be published in the text version of the Today briefing and on our social media accounts. In addition, we have done a lot of work with our historians and documentary scientists, and we have accompanied this material with pictures and photographs of the heads of foreign ministries of different epochs. It will be a good material for the preparation of articles, reports in anticipation of Diplomats' Day, and I am ready to answer your questions. Is International Life with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. At the end of January, just several days ago, several high-ranking officers of the French Ground Forces Command, as it is reported, thoroughly studied the experience of historical battles by conducting a commander staff exercise using the Battle of Moscow simulation. So, as stated in this press release, French officers and staff members mastered troop command techniques in large-scale conflict conditions. How would you comment on this type of games organized by the French military? Indeed, I have seen these materials in the media. There were debates online. As we can make a conclusion from the publications in French sources, it refers to the exercise held on January 26-29 this year at the Gaming Bureau. It turns out there is such a bureau of the Prospective Combat Operations Command of another exercise where ground forces, staffs and units, as stated, it's a quotation, were introduced to the culture of tabletop wargaming. Based on the example of some games, one of which is Battle for Moscow, which was created in the 1980s. Back then, it is difficult for us to assess the practical benefit of such exercises. Certainly the defeat of the Nazi hordes near Moscow in 1941-1942 is closer to the present than Napoleon's army crossing of the Berezina in 1812. Or say the Battle of Poltava in 1709. However, each of these victories of Russian arms should firmly imprint in the collective memory of Europeans and just inflict ultimately the attempts to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia and to conquer, as they dream, to conquer Moscow. But the European ruling circles, they have extremely short memory. Maybe it has been erased, maybe reformatted, maybe it's time to talk about historical dementia. One can only hope that the French military will draw the right conclusions from studying the results of the Battle of Moscow. Thank you very much. Is RIA Novosti with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Christina Rodriguez, RIA Novosti. We have one question today, if you allow me. I would ask you to assess the situation in the Serbian province of Kosovo following the snap parliamentary elections held there at the end of last year. You know, despite attempts of authorities of the so-called state, as they call themselves, the state of Kosovo, to demonstrate some kind of democratic process, the situation continues to deteriorate in practice. The ruling elite's success in the recently, as they call them, parliamentary elections, the Pristina administration is accelerating its efforts to purge the province of the Serbian population. That's the right name of what is happening there. In violation of all applicable procedures, the Serbian least political party was stripped of one parliamentary seat, and it's just a violation of the rights of the Serbs. The so-called Prime Minister, of course, allegedly Prime Minister, ultranationalist Albin Kurti, he announced the implementation starting from the 15th of March of the so-called foreigners law prohibiting anyone, prohibiting the stay to those who do not have citizenship or some permit document. So Serbs living on their historical territories, they are declared actually outsiders. Another discriminatory vehicle law, which affects the entire fleet of Serbian medical, education and social institutions. Vehicles are required to be registered according to Kosovo Albanian regulations. So what democracy are we talking about? Where is this collective Brussels that has so much promised to Belgrade? Such promising European prospects, but ignores for some reasons the problems created to the Serbian people, to the Serbs right now. What has been mentioned, if we accumulate that, the rights of non-Albanian population are being violated, access to healthcare, to education as well, ignoring fundamental international legal documents and norms regarding the reconciliation process in Kosovo. And this Serb community, its representatives are being quickly arrested, and criminal cases are published. They are hastily fabricated and have all the consequences. So the EU, it ignores those violations of human rights. They just fight Russia on international platform, and also Serbia. When they fabricate charges regarding the criminal cases invented by themselves. Now they ignore the suffering of people to whom they have promised a bright future. It's a rampant nationalism that is personally fanned by Alban Kurti. It's overlooked by the European Union, but it has committed to coordinating diplomatic efforts in Kosovo. It is either incapable or unwilling to act. It's just dirty aspirations, hypocritical and deceiving. What the EU has done in order to involve Serbia in the orbit of its interests and to fail to meet the obligations, to comply with what has been promised. Now we note Belgrade's response to anti-Serb provocations. Yes, it's becoming more and more difficult to do. But Belgrade, its actions are based on UN Security Council Resolution 1244, leaving room for dialogue with Pristina. The Security Council decision provides every opportunity to normalize the situation in the province, ensure sustainable peace, and ensure the rights of all peoples residing there, while other participants in the process boasting of universal European integration instruments as a way to resolve those problems. They have chronically and consistently failed, all those instruments, and all the promises turn out to be false. Thank you very much. Is Xinhua with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Xinhua correspondent is here. During a recent visit to China, the Secretary of the Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, criticized Japan's remilitarization. What are the dangers of these in the condition of the crisis, security crisis, and which measures are to be taken for deepening strategic cooperation between China and Russia in order to jointly address global and regional challenges? Thank you. We have repeatedly stated that Japan is moving toward remilitarization, and our Chinese friends share this assessment. They are concerned about the current policies by Senai Takaichi cabinet, including regarding Taiwan. We continue to closely monitor the situation and reserve the right to take the necessary measures to prevent damage to Russian interests and security in the Asia-Pacific region. What is well known in China and in the world in general Russia and China are consistently strengthening foreign policy coordination, which is a crucial component of the Russian-Chinese comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction, and serves as a stabilizing factor in global and regional affairs. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Sputnik Abkhazia with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello. My question is as follows. Last week you met with participants in the new Media of Abkhazia educational program. Approximately 50 journalists, bloggers and media managers from the Republic. The project was organized by the administration of the President of Abkhazia following the Russian New Media Workshop program. How do you assess this meeting and generally the effectiveness of education and social projects in Abkhazia similar to those in Russia? Yes, indeed. On the 28th of January, at the request of the leadership of the dialogue regions as part of the new media workshop, we met right here at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with representatives of press services and media outlets and bloggers from Abkhazia. It was quite an open and an interesting meeting. It was the opening of the third training module of this program. The first two modules took place directly in Abkhazia, and now our colleagues from Abkhazia came to in-person educational events in Moscow. They invited us to the center's base, and we just invited them here in order to show them, demonstrate how we work. We discussed a wide range of issues, Russian-Abkhaz relations, approaches to promoting the positive image of our country's regional problems. Of course, we particularly focused on historical, cultural, natural and touristic advantages in Abkhazia that annually attract many tourists to this beautiful and hospitable country. I think it is not for us to evaluate the effectiveness of such educational projects. It's for those who takes part in them directly. I think it was interesting, and those programs give a wide range of opportunities. And how the participants treat them, it's a question to them. I would remind currently in Abkhazia as well in South Ossetia, there is a whole range of educational and social-oriented projects with the use of Russian expertise. We interact with Team Abkhazia and Russia Land of Opportunities organization, the launch of School Navigators project in collaboration with the Rostes Center Institution, Knowledge First Education Marathon, and voluntary work of Dobro Center, together with Dobro.rf Association and others. We know that such initiatives are in demand in this republic and contribute to strengthening Russian-Abkhaz friendship. Thank you. Thank you. Is China Media Corporation with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We have two questions today. Donald Trump has recently made a statement that Narendra Modi has agreed to stop purchasing Russian oils, and Washington will reduce tariffs on Indian goods from 25% to 18%. How would you comment on this? U.S. President's claims to dictate to independent states with whom they can trade and with whom it is not allowed, they are not new, as well as India's position, which has repeatedly been voiced by the country's leaders, both in contacts with Russian counterparts and publicly. In economic cooperation, New Delhi is guided solely by national interests, making sovereign decisions based on commercial expediency. We have no reason to believe that our Indian friends have changed their approach. We remain convinced that India's purchase of Russian hydrocarbons is beneficial to both countries and contributes to maintaining stability in the international energy market. We are ready to continue close cooperation with our Indian partners in this area. Thank you. And on the 2nd of February, Vladimir Putin signed a decree establishing the years of Russian-Chinese cooperation in education in 2026-2027. What are your expectations from those years of education, and what impetus can they give to cooperation in the educational sphere? Let us have a look how those cross years of culture were held, and they were a great success. The public, it estimated them, assessed them accordingly. There were more than 400 various events organized. Those were official events, but the number of unofficial events who have supported this interstate policy, there were much more of them. This thematic project has taken bilateral and cultural humanitarian exchanges to new heights, significantly increased their momentum, opening up broad opportunities and establishing direct contacts between cultural and artistic representatives of both countries. 2026-2027 were declared the years of education between our countries. Bilateral ties are actively developing, and there is a possibility to study in another university without losing one's status at the home institution. Our flagship project is being successfully implemented. The joint Russian-Chinese University in Shenzhen opened on the basis of Lomonosov Moscow State University and the Beijing Institute of Technology. The task of training highly qualified personnel is relevant, with the knowledge of Russian and Chinese includingly, covering new areas.
I think you will agree with us that the youth is important to promote our strategic cooperation because they will define the future of the world, and we see strategic objectives in preparing personnel, those who will be able to enhance the whole package of our avenues of cooperation, and to achieve that we need to create all the necessary conditions so that in the future those who study today will become first-class experts and will be able to use their skills and their knowledge for the benefit of our states. Let me add one more comment. Have a look at how the West treats Chinese students. So they start by inviting them, but further on they expel them for some reasons which have nothing to do with laws, law obedience or anything else. It reaches the xenophobic levels. It is not only about Chinese students, it includes students from other states. Students from various states are invited to get enrolled to various curriculum, but further on they are no longer needed, so they turned out to be trapped. They spent their money, they had some ideas for their education, but they somewhere in the midstream they end up being rejected to renew their visa. There's just one example. Sometimes these stories end up with tragedies. I hope that not lives have been traumatized so much, but it is never the case between us and China. We have a respect-based dialogue. We do have some problems which rise on the way, but they are being resolved with mutual respect. And of course, the fundamental knowledge is of high level. Is Reuters with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have a couple of questions to ask you. The first refers to the expiration date of the START Treaty. Well, some say it expires on the 4th of February, some say it expires on the 5th, but do you have a clear information and accurate information about the expiration date? Well, you know, I have something even more exciting to tell you. something which will be useful for you. Soon, a fundamental material by the ministry will be published on that issue. We received various questions and the answers will be included into that material. So I would refer you to that material. And I believe that we will simply have to wait until it is published. It will happen today. And here is my second question referring to Iran. Press Secretary of the Russian President Dmitry Peskov said that the topic about the supply of enriched uranium is being discussed, has been discussed for quite a long. Can you tell us, are there any talks ongoing about Russia's importation of enriched uranium to Russia? Well, you know, Russia once suggested to import uranium to Russia, the remnant uranium. Currently, this topic is still on the table, but you need to take into account that these reserves belong to Iran. It does not contradict Iranian obligations about non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. It is up to Iranians to decide on where to export it, whether to export it or not. Should they decide to export it, it is up to them to decide where to supply it. As for our stance on this matter, it is well known to all the interested parties. It has remained unchanged. We have always been committed to finding exclusively diplomatic and political solutions. We are hopeful that during the Friday meeting between the high representatives of Iran and our officials in Istanbul will help us to find solutions and to avoid any further escalation. We believe that any pressure exerted on Iran will not result in any positive solutions, and we hope that we will be able to avoid that. Thank you. Do we have Lenta Ru with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I have one question. During the last month, U.S. administration have been exerting pressure on Cuba using direct threats of a military force. What is the ministry position on this, and what is the real support that Russia can give Cuba? Well, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, gave comments repeatedly on that topic. There were also comments published on the 31st of January. There is one thing I would like to stress, that the strategy of pressure on Cuba has been used by Washington for decades continuously. It aims at the economic asphyxiation of the country. No one hides it. The position of Russia remains unwavering. Unilateral sanctions against sovereign states are intolerable because it goes bypassing the UN and other charter provisions. We resolutely condemn any illegitimate sanctions against Havana. We are convinced that despite these obstacles, Cuba will persist in its economic development in relation with other states. This social and economic situation is the result of the 70-year trade and economic and financial blockade imposed by the U.S., but we are committed to developing multifaceted cooperation with Cuba for the benefit of its citizens. Newsroom. We have two questions. In Finland, more often we hear about the possibility of restoring relations with Russia. Recently, we heard that Helsinki will have to build a dialogue with Russia. Previously, we heard that Finns are moving to Russia to work despite the closed borders. Are there any signals to restore a dialogue from Finland? And what is Moscow's stance on that? Well, you know, My opinion is that, first of all, it is up to Finnish authorities to restore critical thinking. They need to revamp their statements in a way. They need to forget all those Russophobic statements that they made over the last years. Once again, they need to restore this critical thinking towards everything they say. And somehow this has to be linked to their mouth to avoid all those hideous statements that they produce. I hope that Finnish national interests will not be left to oblivion. And once again, these national interests have to be linked to critical thinking and to the mouth of the leadership. And once it is done, only then, maybe, we will be able to move forward. We note that representatives of the Finnish political establishment, acting and former, from time to time, mention the possibilities, they say, at a certain point in time, restore a dialogue with Moscow, as you said. The head of the government, Alexander Stubb, and Vladimir Kiviniemi, and Prime Minister of Finland, made such statements. Very often, such discourse is given with some conditions. For instance, the ending of the Ukrainian conflict, as if it was not their project. They say that even after the solution is found, the relations will not come back to the previous level. Well, here I would address them to the statement by the Russian leadership. They tend to use business as usual, but it will never be as it used to be, because they were those who undermined trust and confidence. And they did so much mess that it will never be able to have business as usual. For us, such statements by Finnish officials is the recognition that the policy of isolating Russia leads to a stalemate. At the same time, no practical moves to normalize bilateral relations undertaken by Helsinki are noted here. On the opposite, the Finnish authorities do their best to follow the Western policy to inflict, as they say, the strategic defeat to Russia. Let us not forget about Russophobic, nationalistic narrative and sanctions. We would like to point out that in principle, Russia never rejected a frank dialogue with all states, including those who are led by hostile governments. Unlike them, we never cancel anyone. We never ban anyone. We never use this nationalistic discourse. We never humiliate anyone. We are always willing to work the principles of good neighborhood, mutual respect, equal rights, and of course, taken with due consideration of vital national interests. But it is hardly likely that any advancement are possible without fundamental shifts in the Russophobic policy of the Finnish authorities. And our second question, what is the Russia's position toward the Estonian legal act giving the right to military to sink dangerous and suspicious ships? Do you consider it as an attempt to limit freedom of navigation and legalization of piracy? Well, it brings us back to the April 2025, when the Parliament of the Estonian Republic adopted a law according to which the Estonian defense have the right to use force in regard to civil ships or other floating vehicles to eliminate the threat to infrastructure. These powers include the Baltic Sea, internal waters, territorial sea, and exclusive economic zone of the country. But according to the international law, it does not belong to the coastal state territory. Let us not forget about the UN clause. Once again, it is universal in application. Our position hasn't changed. Once again, Westerners are willing to use the international law to serve their vested interests in violation of the international law. These are absurd attempts. They use quite bizarre constructs that they invent without any legal foundation. We said previously that our country is going to respond appropriately to risks and threats coming from Estonia. Estonians do not dare apply this new legislation towards Russian courts, but we call upon states to respect the international law of the sea norms. We are going to monitor the situation closely. Bold News, are you with us? Good afternoon. European politicians, they're saying more often about the breakdown of the historical memory. For instance, the president of Poland, Karol Nawrocki, condemned the Soviet Union in unleashing the Second World War and in its involvement to Holocaust, thus insulting the memory of Soviet warriors, liberators, and victims of genocide. And Kaja Kallas, the head of the European diplomacy, said that over the last 100 years, Russia invaded more than 19 states. How can we react to such statements? How can we protect the historical memory? Well, we reacted already to statements given by Kallas and by Nawrocki. Well, not all the states managed to get rid of their Nazi past. In the last years, more often we face the historical aggression, or rather historical dementia. We hear the growing war against monuments and memorials erected in honor of warriors with Nazism. We see memoirs being published where actions by those condemned by the Nuremberg Tribunal are glorified. Clearly, this brings us back to what we have been saying for many years about the history being distorted, being disfigured in order to rewrite it and to bring down monuments to the real heroes and to erect monuments to criminals. These actions cannot be justified by whatever objectives, geopolitical objectives. Such activities, sometimes with connivance or with support of the official authorities, play into the hands of those who glorify racial purity and racial or ethnical discrimination. But let us once again remember what kind of example it sets for the younger generation. It is encouraging that many states, like Russia, condemn such manifestations. Russia repeatedly submitted to the UN General Assembly its resolution on the 15th of December 2025. The plenary of the 80th session of the UN General Assembly adopted the draft resolution submitted by the Russian Federation for the 21st time. 119 states expressed their support to the resolution. It is noteworthy that European states prefer to abstain from voting on this initiative, and the US delegation, who put to a vote our project under the pretext of caring for the respect for the freedom of peaceful assembly and association and the freedom of opinion and expression, they did not hesitate to justify their position in order to promote notorious revisionist approaches to the Second World War, including the thesis of the equal responsibility of two totalitarian regimes for the outbreak of the war. Once again, it is not about political correctness, not about manifestations of the freedom of opinion, but it is about falsified results of the Second World War, about the desire to rewrite the history, absolutization to the of the right to the freedom of expression and freedom of assembly and associations, contradicts the spirit and letter of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discriminations. Of course, I would like to point out that our Western colleagues for many years tried to convince us that the topic of the above-mentioned resolution has nothing to do with the current problem of modern forms of racism. But if we are talking about distant past, why does the collective West oppose vehemently the Russian project? We believe that the problem of glorification of Nazism is tightly interlinked with another cancer, I would say, Russophobia. Everything that has to do with our state requires cancellation or total rejection. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation has contributed a lot to fighting against the falsification of the history of the Second World War, has contributed to countering the revival of Nazism, and drew attention to the situation with the Soviet military memorial sites. The scale and the depth of the practice to eliminate the monuments to the heroes of the war have enhanced. On the eve of the 9th of May 2025, a brief report was published by the Ministry on the topic 80 years after the Great Victory, the shadow of Nazism once again covers Europe. In September 2025, another annual report was prepared on the situation with the glorification of Nazism. You will find a link to all those documents at the end of this briefing.
This report was made on the anniversary of the victory over militarist Japan and the end of the Second World War. Also, actions were mentioned as a result of which history is falsified, and it's about participants from Italy, Germany, and Japan, with the mention of the Nazi regime and the situation in the 1930s and the revanchist ideas. So that's our reply for the attempts to falsify history and change the outcome of the Second World War. So we remember the crimes of militarists and Nazis, and the work will be continued. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Vertex with us? Is Vertex with us? No, then we move on. Is Anadolu with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We have one question today. Yes, hello. The US entrepreneur Elon Musk introduced additional verification measures in order to restrict the use of Starlink terminals by Russian users. So what is done in order to argue those measures? I would remind you, the operator of the Starlink system is a private American company. It does not provide services in our country. Moreover, to operate such systems in our country, any foreign company must obtain permission from the regulator and comply with national legislation. We have documented numerous cases of a company refusing to comply with our requirements. There are illustrative examples of the use of this system during the recent anti-government protests in Iran and Venezuela, and support provided for terrorist groups in Africa and Southeast Asia, as well as to Ukrainian armed forces. And we initiated the holding of an area formula meeting, an informal UN Security Council meeting on this topic on the 29th of December 2025, and reaffirmed the need for low-orbit satellite internet system operators to respect the legislation of national legislation of the states in whose territories they provide their territories. Thank you. Is the Voice of the Fatherland with us? Yes. Anastasia Abramova, Voice of the Fatherland. We have two questions today. The first of them, recently Andreas Prutz made a speech in the Latvian Seima. He stated that Latvia must take the lead on issues of holding Russian trade in the Baltic Sea. How would you comment on his statements? We actually daily comment on statements by various Western figures who just make empty statements wearing some glasses of their own. Usually the Russian Ministry of Defense makes comments on this matter. You can approach them for comments. If you need our assistance, we would provide it. Thank you very much. My second question. Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin announced the completion of a significant number of tasks under the Union Treaty with Belarus, strengthening independence from foreign supplies in industry and creating a unified economic space. What is the experience of integration within the Union State with Belarus? How can it be used as a model for strengthening sovereignty in other forums, such as the EAU, CIS, and SCO? I have a reference in this regard. So, the more participants, the more difficult it is to find a mutually acceptable solution. And it is very important here, like the sisterly nature of relations between Russia and Belarus, whose peoples are connected with multi-century history, spiritual and moral values. If you're interested, I think you have highlighted not only the integration union of Russia and Belarus, but also other mentioned structures. Then interaction on the basis of the SCO is an important vector of our cooperation. I would like to understand, are you interested in interaction between Russia and Belarus within the framework of these organizations? No, wider with others. more republics and more countries that have participated in those unions. Yes, could you repeat then? Yes, Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, I have understood that. As an experience of successful integration within the state union with Belarus being used as a model for strengthening sovereignty in other forums, such as the EAU, CIS and SCO. Okay, I have understood. I will prepare and reply to this question with taking into account all the data, figures, and we will reply to you. Thank you very much. Goodbye. And goodbye. Is Embassy alive with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello to my colleagues. I represent Embassy Live, the Embassy Live media outlet, and I have two questions. The first one, on the 29th of January, the UN Civilization Alliance Forum was held. How do you assess those actions and what are the approaches of Russia on this important international platform aimed at intercultural and interreligious dialogue? I would remind that Russia was one of the founders of the UN Alliance of Civilizations established in 2005, and our country is a member of its group of friends. We view the Alliance of Civilizations as a promising platform for expanding inter-civilization and interreligious dialogue. This structure operates within Russia's fundamental approaches, reducing ethnic and religious differences, easing social tensions, programs in education, youth policy, media, and migration. We attach particular importance to the Alliance's efforts to strengthen spiritual and moral values. Russia is a multi-confessional and multi-ethnic state. It continues to uphold moral principles in international affairs. Principles of kindness, peace, and justice. We assign a key role to fighting against religious intolerance and violations of the rights of believers. Such actions have been particularly destructive on the territory of Ukraine, whose authorities have systematically persecuted the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Such actions undermine the foundations of interreligious dialogue, create the basis of such a total not only intolerance but hatred, basis for social conflicts, contradicts international obligations. We hope that the Alliance will continue to expand its constructive activities. We are ready to provide every possible assistance in realizing its potential and deepening cooperation in achieving peace and harmony among civilizations. Thank you. And our second question. On the 29th of January, President Vladimir Putin hosted a visit of Sheikh, the Emir's Sheikh in the Kremlin. And the parties discussed international situation and the situation in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin particularly noted the efforts of the Emirati side in the settlement of the Ukrainian crisis. So, what agreements have been reached? Have there been any agreements of mutual support in the context of the Ukrainian crisis? So I would note that traditionally the presidential agenda is commented by presidential administration, and there is a relevant material on the Kremlin website already. Thank you. Is author I with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Ruslan Pankratov, author I. Taking into account a full ban of the European Union on Russian LNG imports by 2027, how far has a practical reorientation of Russian gas supplies and oil to Asian markets has gone, including Southeast Asia, India and China. And does the Russian Foreign Ministry see a need for political insurance for these energy routes through new agreements within BRICS and the SCO? But you see that as of today, the destructive actions by European countries and NATO countries have turned energy space, energy markets into an arena of confrontation globally. And the sphere of such tough, fierce, non-competitive but aggressive aspirations and lead to the destruction of established resource supply chains. Clearly, the EU's primary goal is disrupting the functioning of the Russian economy and inflicting a strategic defeat, as they call it, on Russia, and not their own profit. For example, in prices, it's just a classical story of harming someone else just because they're angry. And we have caused such emotions for our entire life. So we deepen cooperation with Asian countries that see the future as productive development, productive interaction. And our country has effectively shifted its primary supply vector of gas, has found a source of growth in the East. Our closest partners are from the EU, CIS, BRICS and SCO countries. So our agreements are bilateral and BRICS multilateral dialogue plays an important role, like non-discrimination of any fuel type, taking into account the specific characteristics and development priorities of our countries. It is reflected in the relevant statements by BRICS leaders and ministries. In particular is the final declaration of the 17th BRICS Summit, Rio de Janeiro, the 5th-7th of July 2025. Socio-economic development and national security are emphasized, as well as the need to strengthen it by creating stable energy markets and uninterrupted energy supplies from various sources and ensuring the resilience and protection of critical infrastructure. Last year, the BRICS Energy Cooperation Roadmap for 2025-2030 was adopted. It includes expanding hydrocarbon supplies and improving the interconnectivity of energy systems. The BRICS Energy Research Platform is successfully operating. Within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a collaboration mechanism was established in 2021, the meeting of energy ministers of member states. Significant work has been carried out to coordinate partners' approaches to this highly sensitive issue in international relations. This includes the concept of cooperation in the energy sector 2021, the SCO Green Belt Program for the implementation of modern resource-saving and environmentally friendly technologies in member states, 2021 as well. The statement of the SCO Heads of State Council on ensuring international energy security 2022, the joint statement on cooperation on new fuels and modeling in the energy sector 2023, the statement of the SCO on sustainable energy development 2025 and many others. Currently, the strategy for the development of energy cooperation of the SCO member states through 2030 has been adopted in Astana. It was adopted on the 4th of July 2024. Last year, at the organization's summit at Tianjin, a roadmap was adopted. In particular, the SCO's trade and transit potential, exploring the possibility of diversifying export routes, including natural gas and liquefied natural gas markets, deepening cooperation between petrochemical producing and consuming countries, creating joint projects for the production of hydrocarbon-based products, and many, many more. If necessary, the SCO platform could be used to discuss and coordinate popular projects in the oil and gas industry. Thank you. Thank you. I would ask, I have already invited this media outlet, but did not get a reply. Is Vertex with us? If not, maybe some technical issues, or the issue has been cancelled, the question has been cancelled maybe. If the journalists have not received an answer from us, we can reply individually. Please send your questions. And the questions I have already mentioned, we will prepare additional materials. You will get your reply in the nearest time. Thank you very much. I would like to draw your attention for the second time that very soon the interview of Sergei Lavrov, Russian Foreign Minister, will be published to RT channel, and it will be in the coming days. A detailed interview on the relevant international agenda and in the context of Diplomats' Day. Thank you very much. All the best to you.